Hey gang, what's going on? One for the Byte That team, Ryan and Keith by my side. We're back here with part 2 of our Randy Orton Superstar Spotlight right here on Byte That. Now in the first part we talked about his origins, evolution, him becoming the World Heavyweight Champion, the youngest one in history. And now let's take a little quick bonus round, guys, and talk about the RKO, his finishing move, where at first it looked a little odd, just, you know, people just kept poking fun. It's a Diamond Cutter ripoff. But eventually he made it his own until the point where it came out of nowhere. So what did you guys think about the RKO, and where would you rank it or among maybe your potential favorites?
I think it's up there as one of the best just because of how versatile it is. And once again, he made it his own. You know, he made it different than the Diamond Cutter. You know, he does a kind of a more dramatic leap and really emphasizes the out of nowhere effect. Like if someone, you know, jumps at him from like a high point, he can hit it. So it's just kind of become this thing. And then he added for the less out of nowhere RKOs, he does the whole like snake coil up thing.
Yeah.
So he's made his own build up to it too. So, I mean, RKO, it's just, like I said, I think the versatility and just flashiness of it is what everyone loves.
I agree on basically everything you said. It's the fact that Orton's made it its own and how he can hit it from out of nowhere at like any point really makes it an exciting move. But let's not forget, it took Orton a while to get to that point. Like, you can find a lot of good videos on YouTube, like that one where he goes to RKO Chris Jericho and just misses miserably.
Man, yeah.
So it took him a while, but he did get it.
It's gotten to become easily one of my favorite finishers. As Ryan mentioned, it can either be set up or out of nowhere, so I think that's easily what you look for in wrestling. Now, something else that people have always looked for in wrestling, The Undertaker. When was this streak going to end? Now, it wasn't until WrestleMania 21 that there was that one guy where people were like, this could be it. He's really young, but who else? Because even back then, this is 2005, and at 2005, we're thinking Undertaker doesn't have a lot of time left. Little did we know, there were a lot of years left before that was still a thing. But looking back, taking it to you first, Ryan, Randy Orton, should he have been the one behind the whatever the hell it was and won?
Behind the one in like 12-1, I think it was at
yeah,
the time.
something like that.
Or 11-1. I think if it was going to be anyone at that time, I think Orton would have been a good choice.
I think it would have been 12-1. Quick side note.
What? 12? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, at that time, I really think if it was going to be anyone, it was going to be him. That was the last time I really believed the streak could end before it shockingly actually ended. Because after that, you know, it was like Mark Henry or Batista or Edge, and it's like, you're like, you know, they're not that person right on the cusp like Orton was at that time, because, you know, he had turned heel again after a failed babyface run. And I think this is where, you know, Orton, you know, like that, the failure as a babyface was really kind of getting him cutting his teeth to really kind of become his own person in his own like solo act as a heel. And the program with The Undertaker was excellent and was one of the best build-ups to the streak. And one of the first times they really emphasized the streak at WrestleMania.
It was the first time.
Like, the stars were aligned for it to happen. But, I mean, I don't think it was a detriment at all that it didn't happen. But if it was going to be anyone, it should have been him.
I agree. I mean, just from a character standpoint, how he was the legend killer. And there was a legitimate legend building around The Undertaker and the streak. But like Ryan said, I don't think it's a negative thing that it didn't happen, because it led to much like better things from both The Undertaker and Randy Orton's standpoint. But it was cool. It was really refreshing, number one, to see Orton heel at that point again, because even though there was that low in that babyface, in the long run, it helped him be a better heel. Like, you really appreciated Orton as a heel more because of that failed run. And then, yeah, it helped really build The Undertaker's streak at the same time.
Yeah, I think the stars were certainly aligned during that point in time. Cowboy Bob Orton got involved because you're talking about legend killers. So, you know, they bring in his father, who's also a legend, who has at some point maybe interacted with The Undertaker. And there was no better build. I think that this was essentially not only the first time that the streak was brought up, it was the perfect time to bring it up, and possibly the only storyline, because afterwards it just became, well, Randy didn't beat him, so can I beat him? And then the other guy kept saying it. CM Punk's entire thing was pretty much that. So
yeah.
Was he the right guy in the wrong time, though? Hypothetically speaking, we know Brock Lesnar ended it. If it had been another point, maybe 5-6 years, do you think Randy could have still been the guy, or were you simply cool with the decision?
I think if we look 5 or 6 years in the future, I think Orton was so far away from that version of Randy Orton that I don't really think it would have made much sense.
Yeah, or even if you took like the young Randy Orton, like say last year or something, and done it, I still don't know if it would have been right, because at that point in time, the streak was the first time they truly emphasized it. I mean, they always brought it up, but they truly emphasized it as the story going into Mania. But it was like, it didn't become super, it didn't become like a supernatural thing quite yet. It wasn't bigger than WrestleMania, which it almost became, like, so it was right at that cusp of, it's a big deal, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. And then it just became more iconic year after year after year. So you needed like a superhuman like Brock Lesnar at that point to stop it. So I think if it was like you took Orton at the age he was then, like last year, and it's like, no, you need a superhuman, and it's got to be Lesnar.
That's true, and funny the comparison. Back then, Undertaker was still a regular part of the roster, so he won the match, but the night after, he was still there. Look, recently, even Bray Wyatt lost the match, but the Undertaker is still nowhere to be found. So I think at that point there, I guess the conclusion was really good. Now, after this, in 2007, things sort of started to go back for Randy, where he started feuding against Triple H, but the tables were turned. DX was back, poopy cock a fart, whatever you want to say right now. Wrestling isn't wrestling. And then he aligns himself with Edge at some point during this time also. So we have Rated-RKO, which, hey, catchy name. What do you got to do?
Really
Although
good.
their theme song...
I was going to say...
Yeah.
I remember always complaining about the theme.
Just the worst tag team theme ever.
Who thought it was a good idea to speed up the song that was already higher pitch and then slow down?
They took the faster song and made it faster, and the slower song slower. It's almost like they could have met in the middle somewhere and made maybe a good theme.
But it didn't happen. It was a nice little break. Now let's get to Rated-RKO. Now, this stable didn't last too long, but they became tag team champions. And personally, I actually want to start with this one. I think that it was a good way of establishing that Randy was no longer the future. I think that this is when we really started to see that Randy is the guy. Like, he is here. The same way John Cena right now is simply another guy. That's why he's the United States champion. He doesn't need the main championship. Randy could afford to be tag team champion, still be in the main event, but not be the WWE or World Heavyweight champion. So, Ryan, what did you think about this feud, the chemistry between Edge and Randy, and then them taking on DX?
I thought they had surprisingly good chemistry, and I mean, I think their styles worked well together. And like you said, Orton, I think at this point it was apparent Orton wasn't going to be the guy. Like at this point in time, John Cena is now the new guy. He has been crowned basically the face of WWE. So this is kind of Orton experimenting in the tag world, because even in like the Evolution days, it was Flair and Batista that kind of did the tag thing. So I think it was good for his career to kind of have that time as being in a tag team.
See, I agree with you guys, but I only agree with you like halfway to the point, because yeah, it was awesome. Orton really came into his own at that point. Like you said, Juan, it's when you kind of felt him as, okay, now Randy Orton's a main event guy. He's going to be here and he's going to be at the highest level. But as far as Rated-RKO went, I wasn't actually that hot on the whole thing, because they just felt like fodder to DX. As far as I was concerned, like, yeah, they're a main event tag team, but they're the guy that they're the guys that DX beats at all the pay-per-views.
No, and I think an interesting factor is that DX, once they broke up, Shawn Michaels came back SummerSlam 2002 against Triple H. Triple H had a lengthy singles run, but Edge was still the former tag team guy at this point. Even though he was rated R, a lot of people, they still had the problem of accepting him. And then Randy had the failed face run, lost to The Undertaker a couple of years prior. So I could see why maybe some people just, it felt like it was there only to work with DX and not anything else, which essentially
it was.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Because when Shawn Michaels got hurt, that was kind of the end of Rated-RKO as well. Or no, when Triple H got hurt. Triple H was the one that got hurt. My apologies.
So do you think there was more they could have done with Rated-RKO? Arguably two of the best guys in the company. Edge, no longer in the company, but had a great run as a Rated R superstar. What do you guys think about that?
Hypothetically, I think it could have led into a cool heel versus heel feud between Edge and Orton, kind of who's the better one of the two bad guys, but it never really went to that.
Yeah, I was going to say at some point when you have if you have DX feuding with, Rated-RKO, that's a lot of talent kind of bunched up on one spot of the card. You don't want to have that too long. You kind of want to disperse your talent so that your roster, your lineup isn't too thin.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's two cool guys. Their characters are that they are anti-DX. Although, I gotta say, if there was anything that we got out of the Rated-RKO versus DX feud, is seeing Randy Orton mock Shawn Michaels. That is probably the first and last time we have ever seen that side of Randy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right about that. I can't really think of anything else.
Can't help but just disagree, right? But just agree, I should say.
Yes.
So now, Randy Orton at this point has been with Evolution, tried the face thing, didn't really work too well, tried to go for the streak, didn't really go too well. Rated-RKO, there was something there. And now it was time for him to really take the baton, to really take the leading role. And then in around 2011, I think that this is when Randy peaked. Because for a while, people were thinking, is Randy really all that good? That's when the whole, is he underrated, overrated? Then we got Legacy.
He was getting hurt a fair amount.
Yeah, he was getting hurt a lot. That's when the whole shoulder thing happened, so his wrestling style changed and all these things. So we got Cody Rhodes, Ted DiBiase Jr., Manu for a week or two, I think it was. We got the Legacy. We are having Randy face not just Triple H, but faced the entire McMahon family. Really personal feud. Keith, I know that this is one of your favorite storylines, maybe even of all time, especially recently.
It's up there.
Yeah, so can you sort of just give us your thought process during it?
See, yes and no about the storyline thing. The storyline itself was, it was all right, but the thing that I love most about it was Randy Orton during this time, that whole psychotic, you're not really sure if he's mentally stable. That's really when the snake thing started coming in, because it was a very methodical Randy Orton. He would stalk people in the ring and not make it look cheesy. Randy Orton was, as you said, at his best during this time. I think, it's incredible. And Randy Orton during that time is probably one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Easily.
And I happen to miss most of it. This is actually when I kind of ducked out of watching pro wrestling. So I can only tell you what I've seen from highlights and stuff.
I was at the point. I'll let you guys.
Yeah. I will hand off Legacy to you guys because you have much more to say.
I was at the point during that time where I would watch the show to see what Randy Orton did that week, and I think that's really the best compliment you can give from that respect.
And I think they used Randy Orton as an example that, we're PG, but we can have dark characters. Yeah, because this is the point where the matches were being stopped whenever there was a single drop of blood. It happened a lot. It happened during Christian versus Randy Orton a lot, where Christian would be busted open. This is before Legacy. And then with this storyline, the punt. That was one of the things where he really punted the living crap out of Vince McMahon. He gave him a concussion, I believe he did.
Yeah.
He actually did. And then, obviously, the really uncomfortable thing when he had Triple H handcuffed, and then proceeded to kiss Stephanie McMahon in the lips while she was knocked out.
Just great stuff.
Yeah, just great stuff. And keep in mind the mindset. This is around 2011. WWE is way cleaner. You know, they've been a little bit looser since then, but this is when they were pretty tight on the rating part. So I think that this really is when Randy was not only at his best, but really showed that give him something where he can enjoy himself. Even on Twitter, he would point out, he would almost break character, just be like, yep, this is what I like doing, and I don't want to go back to being a babyface. He would retweet whenever somebody brought up the face Randy Orton. Now, interestingly enough, so we have Legacy, that, you know, they have Hell in a Cell matches, and Legacy, I believe the primary goal was similar to be like Randy and Batista in Evolution. Ultimately, that didn't work too well. Randy was still the sole survivor of that group, even though they tried really hard. You can't really deny that.
It ended with Randy, or it ended with Ted and Cody being fed to Randy at WrestleMania, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen people pinpoint moments where they could have actually made some stars out of both of them, and that's just kind of sad thing is you guys it seems like you guys really enjoyed Legacy, but it really sucks that it didn't build any new stars.
See, I enjoyed the Randy Orton part of Legacy. Ted and Cody always kind of felt like they were Randy Orton's sidekicks.
So
they were
maybe
just
you could
there.
say the one failure was it just ended up being the Randy Orton show, and no one else got to really shine.
Exactly.
It was almost like they wanted Randy to do something, but by himself, he was kind of forgettable. Maybe. This is just what I'm thinking. So they paired up these two young guys, but they look... You couldn't buy them against DX, is I guess what I want to say here. Interestingly enough, a couple years later, Randy goes back to being the face of the company.
Well, I actually want to interrupt you there for a minute, because I think it's kind of important to talk about the Blandy Borton stage of Randy Orton's career, because
notice how that's not even in the agenda.
Yeah, we can also bring up the whole wellness violations. So he had, I think, his second strike in like 2012.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah,
and that's when he moved to SmackDown, right? After that,
I'm thinking this is around like WrestleMania 28-ish. He got like a second strike, I think, and got suspended for a month. I think I'm right on that.
We're gonna
figure this out. It essentially led to a year of him doing nothing.
I'm reading up here, and yeah, he got multiple things. At one point, he was suspended for 60 days on May 30th of that year for his second violation of the company's telewellness program. Yes, 2012. He defeated Heath Slater in his return, though, for his benefit. And then he was defeated by Dolph Ziggler shortly after. Went to SmackDown, and yeah, that's when he faced like Christian, Alberto Del Rio. He had really good matches. I think arguably this was some of his best match work, but horrible character, storyline, nothing happened.
For a solid year, Orton just did nothing.
Yeah.
It was really difficult. This was around the time where Brad Maddox was in. This was a weird time in WWE. I believe this was when I was contemplating taking a break. So that says a lot about the product. That's when Orton had
like those weird like mutton chops almost, right? Like he grew out his beard weirdly on the sides, and like that's where that video of him like jumping in the air and doing the splits comes from. That weird time.
Exactly, because at one point the rumor is that they basically wanted Randy Orton to be as babyface as possible. So he literally took the advice and is like, you want me to be babyface? I will freaking do splits after RKOing Mark Henry. I can't be more of a good guy than that. And I mean, technically, he's right.
Of course, though, this whole double wellness violation thing kind of led to the wellness policy like amending itself, where if you did some sort of program or whatever, or you were clean for X amount of days, you could actually get a strike removed. And it was kind of dubbed the Randy Orton rule. Yeah. So he was a pioneer of cheating the wellness system as well.
Yeah, which also brings up, we won't really know this until he retires, but the fact that how come Randy never really broke that barrier? Because if you notice, there's an ongoing trend in all these storylines. Randy's been great. But then John Cena was the guy. Oh, then the Rated-RKO, but it was DX, your legacy, and then nothing really happened. There was a pattern that was definitely happening. And it goes along with this next point. We got to talk about the Authority, where it seems like after everybody gave up on him being the face of the company, he became the face of the company. When
sorta.
Well, the entire storyline, at least, was that, you know, he was the first ever double title holder, the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, and I remember the reception was really neutral in the way that people just didn't really care too much because of everything I've mentioned, and there would be multiple threads online just talking about this. So what was your reaction, Keith, for example, going from such a huge Randy Orton fan where you had like 3 or 4 t-shirts of him and everything, and then you see him get this huge opportunity, but the reception's not exactly what WWE maybe wanted?
I mean, at this point in his career, that's when, like Ryan said, he started getting a little bland, stale. It wasn't the Randy Orton of old, because to use my favorite variation of Orton as an example, he was so far from that, it felt like a completely different person. And even when this all started, when he won that Money in the Bank contract, it felt kind of, excuse the pun, but it felt kind of out of nowhere. It felt weird, like, okay, so are they giving the ball back to Orton? And sure enough, they did. And you know, even during that time, he felt like a good antagonist to Daniel Bryan. He wasn't the main guy. He was the guy that Daniel Bryan could fight with.
I think a lot of it just not feeling right was the way that they kind of did this story was, oh, Orton is the face of the company. You win the title, you're the face of the company. All this emphasis on that. But everybody knows John Cena is the real face of the company. So it always just felt forced. It didn't feel real at all. It just felt, the whole thing felt phony.
And it's funny because it's for everything that we've mentioned. Incredibly solid guy. He has a stand-up look, but the storyline then, after what, 10 years of him being in the company, is that he's the face, when John Cena, who started around the same time, has been the face for like 5-6 years at this point. Yeah, so how do you buy it? It felt artificial. It felt very forced. And then obviously you add the Daniel Bryan factor. So Daniel Bryan finally wins, only to then lose the championship to Randy. And then shortly after, you know, there's the whole Batista situation. A lot of negativity that happened there. But I would say after a while, though, his character sort of started getting good again. When it was the whole, like, is he with the Authority? Is he not? This is when, you know, one of the last angles we saw Dusty Rhodes being involved in, where, you know, Cody Rhodes got fired, but then Goldust was fighting for his job, and he had an awesome, awesome match on Raw with Goldust. What did you guys think about that? Because that was one of the last times, at least as of July 2015, that he was in an emotionally invested storyline.
You know, it was good. It almost felt like everything went full circle at that point, because Randy Orton really started his like superstar career as Triple H's lackey, as Triple H's like number 2. And at that point, it had circled around completely to him being back to that point. So it was good, but it was very hard to get excited from that perspective.
No, it's very true. It's like at the end of the day, he has evolved and everything. And he did become a big star, but he never really became quite what maybe he was supposed to become. And just kind of a side note, like, I think Orton is one of the smoothest in-ring workers, just
Absolutely.
a complete natural. And maybe I'm being nitpicky here, but it's like, I feel like every time I think Orton's going to have like a 5-star classic, it never quite gets there. Like, even like, I mean, don't get me wrong, he has fantastic matches, but I feel like when I get really hyped up for an Orton match, if he's against a really great opponent, I feel like I'm always just a little bit let down. It's never quite what I expect it to be. Like, I mean, even his match with Seth Rollins, I thought was great, excellent, smooth work, but it's great like match. You feel like that should have just stole the show without question. And
Absolutely.
It didn't quite get there.
And it almost seems like the story that we've been saying for, you know, part 1 and part 2, where Randy Orton always had this potential. And that's where I sort of want to close this out, because as of this point, the Authority storyline is where Randy was left off, from either being the face of the company and then he is just in the Authority at one point where he's completely irrelevant in the same storyline, in the same faction, not kicked out. He just becomes irrelevant. Seth Rollins takes over, which leads us to, as I mentioned, the final question. Randy Orton, is he highly overrated or highly underrated? Tough question, because we have made both arguments at the same time.
Or is he rated RKO?
Well, that's option C.
You know, I am going to kind of take my own option C in the way that I think Randy Orton will go down in history as the best number 2 guy, at least like for a long standing time that the WWE has
the
had.
Rock, Stone Cold, or even like.
But you know, even during then, like they were on the same level, right? The Rock and Stone Cold, they were kind of
I
like
get your point, yeah.
They were on the same level, but in Orton's time, it was always like Cena or the main guy, and then here's Randy Orton. He's gonna go down in history as the best like other guy, basically.
It's kind of funny for me. I gotta say he's probably the most underrated guy in WWE history. I know it sounds weird. It sounds
that's a statement.
Back it up.
Because okay, and I'll make my point right now. Because throughout history, you know, as Keith said, The Rock and Stone Cold, they're up there. There's been a ton of guys with potential, but that potential fades away at some point. Randy Orton, he had the blandy borton and all these things, but think of all the storylines that we've mentioned. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. He's had close to 8 to 10 opportunities, and it seems like there's something there that should have peaked at some point. You know, we can go. Legend Killer was probably the only example where something came out of it, where Randy just became the guy. But then everything else, something's gonna happen. Nothing. Just Randy's really solid. Randy, you know, he's on the posters, he's on everything. All right, John Cena's the number 1 guy.
I don't understand how you can call him underrated then. Because I'm actually going to say that he is slightly overrated because, I mean, pretty much nobody's gotten more opportunities than Randy Orton. And you would think with that many, you could really succeed and overachieve. But I feel like, you know, he's just never quite gotten there. And he's never had that true charisma to really just kind of break through that glass ceiling and transcend wrestling and kind of become more than that. Like John Cena, maybe he's not the most well-known mainstream wrestler, but still a hell of a lot of people are going to know John Cena more than they know Randy Orton. And I just think Orton, you know, for all the opportunities he's gotten, I feel like his heart isn't always in it. It's in it. He's in it when he wants to be in it. You know, he doesn't make the most, you know, his Blandy Borton year, he looked bored a lot of the times, you know, whereas I feel like other wrestlers, their heart's in it 110% all the time to make the most of every opportunity. And I feel like when Orton knows that it's not a great opportunity, he just doesn't care.
I think that let me rephrase it to sort of get an idea with what you said. John Cena transcended WWE, transcended wrestling. Right now, you can go on a PS3 and you can buy a theme related to John Cena. He's a PlayStation hero.
He's his own meme. Well, no, Randy Orton's his own meme too. Never mind.
Yeah, he's his own meme, but Randy Orton...
It took a long time, but he got there.
But with Randy Orton, think about it. You don't casually hear about Randy Orton, even though... You physically you look at him and you're like, why is John Cena getting more love? When you look at the guy, he looks like a supermodel, he looks like an actor, he looks like he could be a James Bond guy.
If you could build a superstar from the ground up, he'd look just like Randy Orton, as JBL always says.
And speaking of JBL, that's what I wanted to sort of close this with, at least with my justification. Maybe it doesn't work, but at least it's my opinion here, where we will look back at Randy Orton's career the same way we've looked back at JBL's championship run on SmackDown. JBL's championship run on SmackDown, when it happened, people hated it. They wanted to turn to the channel. But then as the years went by, you would see the comments. It was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
Like, he was such a hateable character. I just wanted him to lose, and he kept winning. But that's what you're supposed to feel for the character. With Randy, I'm going to feel like a lot of these storylines, you tend to forget. He never had that lasting effect, but when you go back and look at it, you think to yourself, That there was something there that never finished evolving. But when you look down the vault, there's always going to be either a good match, a good segment, a memorable moment like the punt with Vince McMahon. But he still never reached that moment that John Cena did, doing way less than half of what Randy did. Because I personally think John Cena never even came close to doing as a variety in terms of character and storyline. At least that's just me.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about especially that last point.
Yeah, so any concluding thoughts about the career, the history, the character that is the Viper, the legend killer, the apex predator, Randy Orton?
I think Orton, he's as good as he's one of the best workers you can have on a roster. He can work well with anybody. But at the end of the day, I think the passion and the charisma just never quite captivated the audience enough for him to kind of transcend wrestling.
Mm-hmm. It's a career of peaks and valleys. His wrestling skill has always been there, and it'll probably always be there, but it's had the highest highs and the lowest lows, and it's fascinating from that.
Yeah, so for those watching, we got 3 questions. Number 1, what is Randy Orton's highest moment, in your opinion, his lowest, and just overall, Randy Orton? If there was one word that you could use to describe him, what would it be? If you didn't have a chance, check out part 1. If you did, well then, here's part 2. Make sure to check out the playlist that we developed right on the description below of some of Randy Orton's memorable moments, just sort of recapping his career. Make sure to subscribe here, hit that thumbs up, and check out the podcast available every single Tuesday. We talk about Raw and so much more. If you have any suggestion for Superstar Spotlight you'd like us to do, related primarily to the WWE, past or maybe present, let us know in the comment section. So until next time, thank you for our first ever Superstar Spotlight, checking it out, supporting us, and we'll be back with a ton more right here on Byte That.
Spoilers, his highest moment was feuding with RVD.
Hey!
Hey!